meeting, more support for Ukraine to make sure Ukraine is in the strongest possible position, both now and in further negotiations. Second, complete clarity that now is not the time for lifting of sanctions. Quite the contrary, what we discussed is how we can increase sanctions to support the US initiative to bring Russia to the table through further pressure from this group of countries.
No lifting of any kind of sanctions until Russia will stop this war. And I think more pressure on it, more packages of sanctions. This is important. The second point, as you said, Keir, that new packages to strengthen Ukraine, and we heard of some of leaders' new packages. We are very thankful to all the leaders.
In a strong and coordinated stance, European leaders have firmly rejected Moscow's demand to ease sanctions, reinforcing their support for Ukraine as the war continues. The leaders of the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, speaking at a high-stakes summit in Paris, made it clear that lifting sanctions on Russia is not an option, at least not now. British Prime Minister Starmer stated, and I quote, "There is complete clarity that now is not the time for lifting sanctions. Quite the contrary. What we discussed is how we can increase sanctions to support the US initiative to bring Russia to the table through further pressure." End quote. His words were echoed by German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who warned that ending sanctions prematurely would be a serious mistake. He emphasized that peace is still far from reality and lifting restrictions would only embolden Moscow. The summit, known as the Coalition of the Willing, brought together over 30 countries, including Ukraine's European allies and NATO officials, to discuss further military and financial support for Kyiv. The message was clear: sanctions will remain in place and pressure on Russia will continue. This comes after the United States announced earlier this week that Ukraine and Russia had agreed to end fighting in the Black Sea. However, Moscow later stated that it would only uphold the deal if sanctions on Russian banks and exports were lifted, a condition that European leaders flatly rejected. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio acknowledged that Washington is evaluating Russia's position but has not committed to any action. Speaking on Wednesday, he said, and I quote, "When the US negotiators return from Saudi Arabia, they will sit down, go through the proposals, and fully assess what Russia's ask is in exchange." End quote. But Ukraine's President Zelensky is not convinced. He accused Russia of stalling for time and using negotiations as a ploy to strengthen its position. Standing alongside European leaders, Zelensky insisted, and I quote, "They are dragging out the talks, trying to get the US stuck in endless, pointless discussions about fake conditions just to buy time and grab more land." End quote. Zelensky also warned that Russian forces are preparing new offensives in Ukraine's Sumy, Kharkiv, and Zaporizhzhia regions, calling for more pressure and more packages of sanctions. He reiterated that there would be no lifting of any kind of sanctions until Russia stops this war. For now, the European position remains firm. The big question is, how will the Trump administration respond? Will Washington maintain its tough stance, or will it reconsider easing sanctions to push for peace? The coming days will be crucial. Stay tuned for more updates.